we discussed the new narratives in reading promotion, but before I start with my short presentation, I'd like, to an extent, continue where Veronica ended this morning. Namely, I think that we live in times of one of the most radical changes in our life, in the history of humanity, and these changes are taking place because of this bloody little small device, which totally changed the way how we operate. Namely, when I was young, what is quite a long time ago, when I graduated at Ljubljana University, I typed my thesis on typewriter. And it was really hard physical work because I had to type it 4 times because of the mistakes which I made. When I wanted to communicate with my relatives in United States and in South America, we needed to agree with the letters when we will phone them. And then when we phoned them, this was extremely expensive. When I started to travel, what was quite a privilege for me because I was coming from a socialist country, I have a kind of pilgrimage, hitchhiking trips to London and Paris, where I used all the money I was able to spare, and I bought books there. And then I returned with my backpack full of books to that time Yugoslavia, taking the border crosses where I know that the custom officers are lazy and they will not to take a look in my backpack. Even more so, communication was different. If I wanted 40 years ago, if I wanted to quarrel with 500 people at the same time, this was mission impossible. It would require a very hard work and access to mass media. Now, I can post something on Facebook, and if it's provocative enough, I can have, in few hours, I can have more than 1,000 enemies. So our social and emotional lives and media lives changed. Long time ago, we needed television to watch movies. We needed to go to the movies, to the cinema to watch movies. But now we can do all this in one single device. And of course, on this device, we can do much more reading than ever before. And in these new circumstances, I think it's a legitimate question. What is the place of the books in all this? Is there anything that books can do better than screen media? And I think the answer to this question is crucial for long-time survival of books. If the answer is no, then we can kiss the books goodbye. If the answer is yes, we can do all what we can to preserve them. Not because we are book people from book industry, but because of some civilizational reasons. And in order to do this, I think we need to figure out what we mean by reading. Because now we do more reading than we did ever before. We read on screens, we read on paper, we also consume content which we used to read in audio formats. We listen to books and we listen to podcasts. We read linear texts and we read hypertexts. We read very short texts on screen in bursts, and we are also capable reading of long texts. And when we talk about reading promotion, I think we need to very clearly figure out about what kind of reading promotion we are talking about. And promoting all these screen modes of reading really doesn't make sense, because people are doing them anyhow. They're doing it by themselves, and this kind of reading is growing and growing. But book reading, of course, is something what requires a certain kind of promotion. And with book reading, I mean reading long-form linear texts. I don't mean hypertexts, I don't mean audiobooks, because listening to books is actually a different cognitive process than reading. Listening is not reading. A blind person can listen, a deaf person can read, but a blind person cannot read as we do. So, discussing the book reading and book reading promotion, I think we need to very clearly figure out that we are talking about reading long-form linear text. And then, of course, a question arises, what is a long-form text? And here we don't have a clear-cut definition. I think in PISA 2018, they defined somehow a long linear text, a book which has more than 100 pages. But that's something what is quite arbitrary, but it's something what needs to be discussed, I think, and figured out. And another question, of course, and this is, I think, the crucial question, is what book reading, what books can do, what other media cannot do in the same way. When we talk about book reading, one of most important, I think, positive externalities of book reading is that we deepen and widen our vocabulary. Book reading is the best way how to learn new words and how to understand that words change meanings in different contexts. In no other media we meet that many new words than in books. And as a human beings, we think and we express our thoughts by using words. So more words I know, and more familiar I am with rules of logical and abstract thinking, about more things I can discuss and about more things I can think. And of course, other colleagues also already mentioned the problem of empathy, of focus, and of thinking about complex issues, because books are about complex things, and if you want to think about complex things, if you want to contemplate complex things, we can do this best by reading books. Of course, a question arises, why is book reading better in achieving these goals than any other media? And my simple answer to this would be regarding empathy and focus, is because when we read books, our imagination is more active than when we watch TV series or films. When I read a book, a fiction book, I create in my own head a film based on this book. I imagine people, I feel relations, I feel smells, I feel pain sometimes. And nothing of this happens when I'm watching a movie or a TV series. So books are doing, if you are capable of reading and if you are capable of focusing on the same thing for a long time and focusing on a book, on a narrative, book narrative, on a linear text for 1 hour is a different thing than focusing on a video game, when everything is happening on screens in front of us. When we read, when we focus on reading, everything is stable in front of our eyes, just our brains are working. And this is, of course, more intensive and more effortful process than watching something. And because it's more effortful, it also has more intensive consequences. So from my point of view, and as we discussed, these are the most important reasons why books are worth preserving as a tool, and they are worth preserving as a media which can do some things which screens cannot do. And with this, they also connect to social health and to better economy. This is, of course, not to say that screens are useless. Just the opposite. As I said, I think that smartphone is one of the most brilliant inventions in human history. But what they can do, this slide is a little bit blurred, but what we can do with screens is we can easily serve the huge seas of information. We have access to huge, vast information. And when we do the screens, we do our decisions very fast. So we also train in fast and strategic decision making. And we also train in collaboration. But what we do with books is that we train more in-depth understanding. If we, by screens, surf in the sea of information, by training our mind into reading brain, we dive into this sea and we understand it more than just by staying on the surface. And with this, we also practice strategic and analytical thinking, and we somehow practice also this feeling for living together. Daniel Kahneman, the Israeli Nobel winner for economics, would very likely call the screens Mind 1 and the books Mind 2. And we need both of them in order to be successful in surviving in contemporary world. And here, I'm very closely relating to what Christoph Blaise said. In order to understand what is happening with books in European landscape, we need to do some very basic research issues. We need to synchronize reading surveys, because if we use different methodologies with reading surveys, then we cannot compare the outcomes in different countries. And if I cannot compare my Slovenian reading landscape with Spanish reading landscape and Norwegian reading landscape, I don't know where we are. I can be very self-sufficient and very happy before I learned that I'm one of the worst. My country is one of the worst in Europe regarding reading culture. And for doing this kind of research, I would very strongly plead for European database on reading habit surveys and also for a database on publishing statistics, because publishing statistics are not just a tool for publishers, which helps them conduct business on the better way, but it's also something what helps researchers and decision makers better understand cultural landscape and cultural mindset of contemporary Europe. Thank you very much.